All right, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to even get a good. I don't know if this stream's going to work because I'm kind of in a black hole. I don't know. So I'm going to do a video while I'm working. I'm going to live stream while working because I have a lot of work to catch up with because I work two jobs, corporation, and sometimes I just can't get it all done. Sometimes I have to, well, what it means is two different apartments, same location, and occasionally I have to work at both at the same time and solve two different source problems, and it means I can't get things done. That's what it means, because there's only one JDIS, right? All right. So that's what's going on right now. So I actually had a topic I wanted to talk to you about, right? All right. That topic is, I'm sure you've heard about it in the news, about transgender athletes. Surely you've heard about this, right? About the transgender athletes. There was recently I think today, a tennis champion who said that basically spoke how it's unfair to have men competing against women because transgender women aren't women. Or I guess it's kind of implied. Well, I'm sorry. No, that might not be true. That's just the sensationalist talk that we're hearing, um, because it's meant to make you angry, right? But the thing is, one way or the other, the view is that it's unfair to have transgendered women competing against cisgendered women, right? Because that gives them an unfair advantage. So let's talk about that, okay? That's the subject I want to talk about. Because let's look at it like this. You know, you transition. You have if you're a male to female, your brain does not match your body. Okay, that's fair. Go ahead and transition. However, depending on a lot of factors, we're talking a lot of different factors at play, you might still have a very male body, which can be very advantageous in athletics. So, in spite of what your mind may be, you might have a very, very feminine brain and mind, but when it comes to your body, your skeleton, your ligaments, your fats, your muscles, all of this plays into how effective you can be as an athlete. And so, like for example, I'm sure you know that there are different kinds of muscle fibers. Men and women have different kinds of muscle. Men and women both share the same kinds of muscle fibers, but at different ratios, right? And so, men have what are called like fast twitch. That helps them to bulk up better, but women are better when it comes to endurance and recovery. And so much goes into this. So, and also men generally have greater bone density, which also factors into how much force you can put into it, how much strain you can put on your bones, how much wear you can put on your bones, and a number of other factors, right? So, that being the case, then you have to ask yourself questions like, okay, we're going to allow male to female transgendered to compete, but how do we do it in such a way as to not give our female athletes a disadvantage against them? Well, I think one of the first questions that you have to ask is, if you're going to look at it like, if you're going to break it down, right? You're going to be like, okay, let's just do it on a case by case basis. Then if you're going to do it by case, then should you not do that with literally everyone? Because selective breeding, people who come from a lineage of athletes are selectively bred to have certain traits, which give them an advantage against other athletes of the same sex. So if you're going to do that for transgender, then maybe you should do it for cisgender, right? But if you do it for transgender, what exactly does that mean? How do you create like a tier system or what? Like what kind of system are you going to come up with? What kind of formulas will you come up with in order to make this viable, right? So obviously it involves x-rays, it involves some very, very invasive scanning and probing, and then how long do you do it? You would of course have to have very strict requirements. It means, well, it just, depending on how they do it, it just might not at all be viable. Oh shit, I forgot to put the tax for that day. Shit. Hold on, sorry. I'm looking something up. I'm trying to put in my financial files and something did not add up. That's very unfortunate. So yeah, ask questions like that. How are you going to make that work? And if you're going to do it like this, then maybe at some point in our future, you'd end up matching up men against women anyway, because of the way you do it, the way you're able to look up size for size. But then when you look at teams, how do you do that? Do you make sure that only people of within a certain range, based on whatever arbitrary formula you come up with, can compete? Would you disqualify overqualified candidates? Like, for example, you have a cisgender genetic female who's on a team. She's got really good stats. She's really, she's got great fast twitch muscles. She naturally produces higher testosterone, has greater bone density, the whole 9 yards, right? She's got all these great stats, selectively bred to be an amazing athlete, warrior class, right? And do you just say, nope, sorry, you can't be part of the team because of the way we match ourselves up? Do you just have yeah, you're gonna be like this. Let's say you have a women's soccer team. Do you have multiple soccer teams for that school or for that franchise? And would there be a situation where you couldn't, not everyone could actually have contribute to a team based on their tiers? Like, let's say each school gets 5 different tiers, 5 different classes for their teams, but they're all soccer teams, they're all baseball teams, they're all football teams, whatever. But then some schools would be disadvantaged. They can never participate because they have overqualified or potentially underqualified, or all they have is underqualified, but never the ones that are at the higher tiers. That would also end up, imagine the system you'd have where you'd really start looking at people like cattle. You'd really start breaking them down and analyzing them, and you'd lose any respect for them as a human being. You just look at them as a means to an end. Can you satisfy this role? No amount of character would factor into it. So your sheer willpower that might make you a really good sportsman. Maybe you're smart. Maybe that's your secret. Maybe you're really clever on the field, and you may not be the fastest, but you're really good at spotting opportunities. Maybe you have a very high visual acuity. Who knows? But because of the arbitrary formulas that they come up with, you just can't play. It just seems so absurd to me. So I have to wonder how that's going to work out. And I think that the answer is going to be, just for now, nobody gets to compete at all. Or everybody gets to compete. And then you have, I don't know what will become of that. Sports wouldn't be the same at all. Because I can honestly see you have inferior athletes being put onto the field who have no right or reason to be on these fields, but they're put there anyway, even for diversity's sake, just so that there's this chance that they could be equal, They're like, well, this other team has this, lower average team member, so you need someone like that too on your team. You're like, yeah, but they're really shitty. Well, it's all you got, so you have to put them on. Like, really? I don't know. I have to wonder about that. So yeah, I think it's kind of absurd. Some of these things. I really don't know if there's a simple answer. I don't think that we're actually ready to have well, it might end up being better just to have like a don't ask, don't tell situation when it comes to sports. Or you might actually have you might have this. You can be transgender and you can compete, but only if you've transitioned pre-puberty. And then there would be an incentive to transition people pre-puberty, which is a problem because if you know anything about an example is for FTMs, there's something called rapid onset gender dysphoria. Now, I'm sure you're going to say, oh, this isn't true. None of that's possibly true. But I disagree. I think absolutely rapid onset gender dysphoria is a real thing. And it is responsible for a lot of unhappiness among LGBT youth. Which is to say that not all trans men should be transitioning. The thing is, the human body is a very complex thing. It's not set in stone at all. Wherever your body is right now isn't necessarily where it's going to be. So you might start off very androgynous, right, as an androgynous female, and later on your body's going to start morphing and producing hormones that change the way you think and feel and perceive the world. And so it's like this. A lot of female to males probably legitimately should be lesbian. And that's fine. Absolutely fine. There's no reason why we should have any objection against that. Nature does produce homosexuality. It does. We even see this in hyenas, with some female hyenas having false penises. They produce extra testosterone and they have an extended clitoris, and they behave just like males. And you could call them transgender, but the fact is, nature does have these anomalies. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they need to occupy that role. And the thing is about this is even my experience is I've encountered a lot of people in the trans community who they think they're doing good by encouraging you to transition. They think that encouraging their brothers and sisters, oh, don't worry, don't listen to what anybody has to say, you do you. And the thing is, the trans community, like a lot of the LGBT community, is welcoming, whereas a lot of other communities are not. A lot of other communities will shut you out. They'll judge you. And they'll look down on you for a lot of reasons. And of course, actually, that is still true in the LGBT community, but for different reasons. Less so much superficially, and more based on stuff like, believe it or not, politics factors into it. So, for example, if you're conservative and queer, well, fuck you, right? That's how they go. So, yeah, they can be quite embracing, very welcoming, and at a time when people are trying to figure themselves out, they're very confused about who they are, what their role is in the world. They don't have an identity yet. Honest to God, I have to say, this country has an identity crisis. The whole Western world has an identity crisis, but especially this country. So it's no surprise that our youth has this problem. So I can't believe I didn't add the stuff together. I wonder if it adds up. Give me a second. I want to just see if I did my maths right. 35.41 plus 32.37 plus, come on, what is your number? 1905.77. 1973.55, is that what I have? That is not what I have. Why is that not what I have? At some point I screwed up. How did I screw up? Give me a second. I want to know what I did wrong. what did I do wrong? Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm inputting my financial files for my store. And something just doesn't add up. It should be 1980.44. It is 1973.55. It's short by $7 and some odd cents. Yeah, so female to males do struggle with this. They also have a higher rate of anxiety. Females in general, genetic females have a very high rate of anxiety, right? And then if you're LGBT, you also are probably going to have a higher rate because of acceptance. Although I'm sure that must be changing. I have to wonder what would keep that from changing, because it's not like people judge you from the heterosexual side, or the cisgender heterosexual side. It's not like they're likely to judge you as much as they ever used to. It used to be that you absolutely had to conform, and now people are much more tolerant, much more embracing. So I should imagine that the factors that go into being LGBT, it's got to be so much better. I don't see how it can't be so much better than it used to be. Please add up. It's 42.3 plus 32.37. And what the hell? Shit. Alright, 35.41. This is for the 14th. Am I looking at the 14th? I'm looking at the 13th. Well, no wonder. I need to go back a date. Shit. Give me a second. Yeah, it always sucks when you put in the wrong date. Ah, fudge. I just clicked X on that. Why did I click X? Oh, okay. Anyway, yeah, so have I talked about other stuff involving transgender? If I haven't, let's do that. Let's do that right now. Okay. I don't believe that most people who are transitioning right now, male to female, female to male, should be transitioning. I think that nature doesn't produce that many transsexuals or transgender. And so we're looking at not a natural phenomenon, not a genetic phenomenon, but a sociological one. And I think a lot of it has to do with even the time in which they're coming up with these gender identities. I think it really is an identity crisis, right? So the question is, why change gender? And I think it might have to do with they just don't want to live under the they don't want to live under traditional gender roles, and that's fine. Let them not live under traditional gender roles. Whoever said they had to. But unfortunately, hold on, 32, 37. Am I looking at the same day? Yeah, that's the same day. So what am I inputting wrong? How am I inputting that wrong? Oh, well. This might make sense. I think I might have input in the wrong freaking place. Okay, let's try this again. Fourth time's the charm. $19.80.44. Bingo. Okay, I put it in the wrong spot. So yes, I think it's a sociological phenomenon. It shouldn't be that high, and I think that we just need greater tolerance. Greater tolerance of the I guess you could say gender expression. I don't think that it's even necessary to go to the point where you start using labels. For example, saying that they're genderqueer, or gender non-conforming, or whatever whatever vernacular they choose to use. In fact, I have to wonder why it is that they insist on doing this labeling anyway. Why not just say, I choose not to do it this way? Why not just say, this is what I'm doing right now, or this is not what I'm doing right now, right? Instead, they insist on this this label, which I think comes down ultimately to the fact that they really don't have an identity, and they really, really want one. But then this is going to bring me to this other point that I wanted to say for a long time. And that is, I don't think that it makes much sense that people are labeling themselves, are identifying themselves. And I know that sounds very, very hypocritical, right? I label myself all the time, but I don't think it's right. I don't think it makes sense. Because it's like this. I think it's a very recent concept of identity, self-identity. And it's also very vain, very freaking vain to think that that you have the ability to identify yourself. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that anyone is objective enough to identify themselves, and I don't think it makes sense that they should be allowed to do that. Because here's what it comes down to. Your identity isn't even for you. Let's tie this into something else. It seems like we have adopted this celebrity mentality of owning your identity, right? You get to own your identity. You call the shots. You determine what the paparazzi sees, what gets covered in the tabloids, whatever PR you have. You have your own PR guy, right? And of course, on social media, we do our own PR for ourselves. We select what we want the world to see about our lives. And it's very vain. It's very arrogant. And it's silly to me. So who are we to make this determination? And the thing is, we're not qualified, especially when we're young, especially when we are kids who do not know our own identities. We don't know who we are, what we want, anything, right? So if anything, this should be something that's given to us, right? Imagine that your identity is a gift to you. Now, you can choose to reject it, but that's something that you really should spend time doing when you're older. Because when you're younger, you don't have a structure. You don't have a form. Why are you taking the time to form yourself? I mean, okay, maybe you can form yourself early on to some degree, but when you're talking about something major, you're not qualified. And just saying, oh, I'm this way. I'm going to match this model. Why? It's just like, even when you're older, though, I still don't think it makes sense, because take otherkin, people that decide to identify as something that is non-human, right? That's absurd. You can't just identify as something as non-human. I mean, you can, but you're stupid, because no one with any sane mind is going to say, yeah, I can see that, you're definitely that. They have to be facetious. They were just playing along. Maybe they're afraid they're going to lose their job if they don't say that there are 4 lights. But the thing is, they almost surely know you're not a dragon, you're not a pixie, you're not a vampire, you're not whatever you choose to be. It's absurd, and it's offensive too, and also it shows a great lack of understanding. Like for example, people that say, "Oh, I'm a wolf," or "Oh, I'm a cat," right? Actual real creatures, not just fictional ones. People that say that these creatures don't understand what the life of these animals actually is like, or their psychology. It's very silly, because they're looking at it from a perspective of a human with a lens, basically with a human lens. So with a human lens, they're not going to really understand things. They need an insight that they can't otherwise get unless they're a scientist, generally speaking. Someone who really studies these creatures and understands what they do, why they do it, and realize that a lot of it, there's no human purpose for it. There may be some utility for why they do what they do, but they're not really going to think with the same feelings. They may not have the same depth of feelings that humans have. Certainly they have smaller brains, and they can't be as advanced as ours, so they're not going to have the emotional capacity that we're going to have. Dogs might give you unconditional love, but the depth, the nuance, right? Maybe the only kind of love that a dog knows is platonic love, right? Whereas humans can know so much more. They can know, like, I'm sure you know, like agape, and of course everybody knows romantic love. Not all loves are the same. You can have like a fraternal love, right? You can love someone as a compatriot. You love your fellow men, but on so many different levels, the relationships certainly wouldn't be the same. But someone that thinks that they're an animal and says, "Oh, I identify as this because this," well, that's absurd. On the same token, though, that can also be used to invalidate many transgender. So then you have to ask yourself, how do you know you're transgender? How do you know that you're a man trapped in a woman's body, or vice versa, right? Because you're looking at it from your own lens, your own subjective lens. You don't know what it's really like to be in that person's body, or you don't know what it's like to be like this man that you see in his body, right? You don't know what they're going through. You don't know what struggles they have, right? So some men really, really struggle with their emotions, getting it under control, partly because of testosterone, but for other reasons as well. The brains form very differently, but if you're genetic female and your brain is formed in a feminine way, but your psychology is affected because of circumstances, right? Which more or less shapes you into behaving in a more masculine role because that happens to be the way you survive. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're meant to be transgender. Same goes for male to female. For that matter, I've encountered quite a number of male to female transgender and cross-dressers who are essentially misogynists because their perception of what it means to be a woman is a very misogynist point of view. They assume that they have to be hypersexual, hyper-feminine, and that's just absurd because that's not what it means to be a woman. One has to ask them what they actually think it really does mean to be a woman and why they think that. And I think ultimately there are sexual motives behind it, which makes them, and I know many people in the LGBT community are going to hate this word, but it makes them autogynephiles. You should look that up. If you don't know that word, look it up. So yeah, I have questions about what it means to be transgender for a lot of people because I don't think that they're really qualified. I also think that if there were a way to determine if someone was actually transgender, like a definitive way to figure out if you really should transition, that you should stop what you're doing if you're not legitimately female or male, whichever, and otherwise you're wasting your time, right? And you're only going to hurt yourself, your psychology, and those around you, because transition does hurt those around them. So if there was a definitive way to prove it, right? Let's say you get a very sophisticated brain scan that also maybe you can measure your heart rate and find out if whether or not, like, you ask certain questions, find out if they're lying. I know that sounds strange, but some people might really want in their heart to be something or for something to be true, but still answer something dishonestly because they really want to give the right answer, right? So let's say you do a scan and you ask them, how do you feel about this? You look at a picture of something. Does this affect you? Does this move you? You know, you find out, like, try to find out what emotions they have, right? You really try to feel them out. If you could really definitively assess someone with a battery of questions with scans like an MRI, and prove for sure whether or not they are transgender one way or the other, male to female, female to male. I don't think most of them would actually go for it, even if you said completely free, 100% free. You don't have to pay a dime out of your pocket, right? Maybe insurance companies would do this because insurance companies would want to save money on transitioning, because God knows it's expensive. But I don't think they'd actually want to go for it. And I think that you'd see a stronger push in society towards just living a gender non-conforming life without having to transition. And that's fine. I think that actually would be healthier for them. But I really don't think that so-called transgender really should be doing this, should be living that kind of life, because it's not, I don't think they're legitimately trans. And then of course, if you tie that into the whole transgender athletes, and then you might actually solve your problem there too, because like I said, if there aren't really nearly as many transgender people as are identifying as such, then they really shouldn't be on those teams. They shouldn't be competing. But then that alienates a lot of people, a lot. Every year, that percentage grows just a little bit more. So it's interesting to think that such a thing might happen, but I don't think it ever would. Honestly, I think I think it's useful in the bigger picture. Let's start wearing our tinfoil hats, right? It's useful in the bigger picture if more people do transition and do castrate themselves and do get hysterectomies or otherwise render themselves infertile, because it means producing fewer to no offspring at all. And that ultimately is green, because you're talking about minimizing your carbon footprint. You're not going to be replacing yourself. You're going to be reducing the population. Once you're dead, there's no one that's going to take your place. So you're not going to expand, you're going to decrease the population. You're not going to maintain the status quo, you're going to decrease that population, right? So I think towards that end, maybe there could be a force. There could be someone in the know, an influencer, or let's pretend that there's a cabal of influencers who know where this is going and think, yeah, let's do this. Let's create a situation where people have identity crises and they don't know what gender they should be. So let's mix it up and make it so that they don't produce, and then the population dwindles, and then the impact on the environment decreases over time. Maybe this is the real Green New Deal, the unspoken Green New Deal. But it's not going to happen outside of the West, I don't think. I think outside the West, you're going to see a lot less of that, because in a lot of countries, especially if you go to the continent of Africa, most of Africa is not going to support that one bit. They have laws against it. They have a culture that's against it. In Asia, they have a culture that's against it, depending on where you are. In the Middle East, they have laws against it. And depending on where you go, of course, they might actually force you to transition because they won't tolerate homosexuality. It's not a good deal. Let's just say that. Yeah, I don't know where I left off, but anyway, I was trying to say, like, even in South America, they're not all that tolerant of being LGBT, especially if you're transgender. So I definitely don't see that happening. I don't see homosexuality and LGBT in general flourishing outside of Western countries, unless there is a push within those other countries from, say, NGOs, changing the culture from within, right? All right. Anyway, I think I've taken up enough of your time. Let me know what you think. Hopefully you found this conversation interesting. Yeah. And know much about me, you should Google me, but we'll say search on, and you'll understand why I speak about what I speak, and that I don't speak out of ignorance. All right. Have a good day. Bye bye.